Well, good morning and welcome to our third virtual workshop. We are thrilled that so many of you attend these virtual events, and that tells us that you would like to know more about elections. Today's topic is all about in-person voting and what you can expect in the 2022 general election. My name is Betty Galanter, and I'm the Voter Outreach Manager for the Elections Department. And as I mentioned, this is our third 45-minute virtual workshop. If you've missed the first two, or if you've missed our 90-minute seminar, you can view them all on YouTube. We record everything and then we upload them to YouTube, and you can simply go to youtube.com/Maricopa Vote. There you can see all of our virtual events, but you can also see our Election Connection video shorts with our co-elections directors, Scott and Ray. I like to call it the Q&A with Scott and Ray. They're usually under 10 minutes. And then we also have our Fill the Ballot video shorts that are less than 2 minutes apiece. And there are 11 different topics of election education that is really important that voters ask us more about. So please go there. And then you can also register for our upcoming virtual events. We have two more coming up, one on September 22nd, and then another one on October 19th. Simply go to our website, which is elections.maricopa.vote. And then when you're there, go to information and then voter education. Of course, you can also subscribe to our Just the Facts newsletter, and there you can get great information and also register for those upcoming events. So today's agenda, it is full of great information. We are going to have two Q&A sessions, one about halfway through our presentation, and then one toward the end of our presentation. Now, you may enter your questions anytime via chat. Just simply type in your question and click submit. We are going to try to answer as many questions as possible today. So you are in for a treat. Our host is Scott Jarrett. He is the elections director responsible for all in-person voting and tabulation operations. Now, Scott's been with the election department now, I think, for over 3 years, and he is a wealth of knowledge, and he directs all of our department operations and implements all of the strategic direction. He works closely with our county recorder, and he reports to the Board of Supervisors. So a couple of things before we begin. I want to make sure that you understand that we are recording this workshop. All of our virtual workshops are uploaded to YouTube for future viewing at your leisure. And to maximize our presentation, our time together here, we ask that you please do keep your cameras off, keep your mics on mute. And we are providing card captioning, and we do have two American Sign Language interpreters with us today, Amy and Dustin. So welcome, Amy and Dustin. And with that, I'd like to say, let's get started. So Scott, I'll turn it over to you.
Fantastic. Well, thank you, Betty. And I heard you in the intro, you said our Q&A with Scott and Ray is usually around 10 minutes. And I think, thank you for that. That's very kind. Our communication team would like us to keep it around 5. Usually Ray and I go over double that time. So, and they've asked me to try to keep this presentation under 30 minutes. So then that will give us 15 minutes for Q&A with Scott. So I will try to adhere to that. So we are starting off with just an overview of the August primary, just recap, and then some general election highlights. So what we see on this slide is we really had historic turnout in the August primary. We had over 866,000 voters participate, and that's the most ever. And as far as a turnout percentage, that was over 35% of the electorate participated. And if you go back all the way to the 70s, on average, turnout usually for an August primary is right around 27%. So we exceeded that by about 8 percentage points. So a very, very good turnout. And we attribute that as, and this is not unusual, especially if we go back to 2018. In 2018, both in the August primary and the gubernatorial general election, both of those had historic turnout. And then again in 2020. So we are seeing this pattern of just voters that are really wanting to participate and cast ballots in our elections. So that's a good thing. I think it's because we provide very accessible, reliable, secure elections for voters to be able to participate. One other thing I wanted to point out on this slide that directly relates to in-person voting is our provisional voters. So we see that for our August primary, we had 2,878. That was actually 2% of the election day voters. And if we go back to prior August primaries, the next lowest was actually 2020, which was 3%. And the next lowest before that was 2018, which was 11%. And the reason we're driving down that number is because we've implemented many improvements to our in-person voting operations. One of those is something we'll talk about later, is our Sitebook check-in station, which allows us to use a vote center model, also allows voters, if they do move within that election cycle, and they go to any one of those voting locations, they can update their address so we can give them the right ballot. So again, lots of improvements in reducing those provisional ballots. And one of the advantages of that, if you go back, I think in the general election in 2012, we had over 100,000 provisional ballots. And those take an enormous amount of time to process and delay reporting results. So lots of advantages to having as few provisional voters as possible. So Betty, can we go to the next slide? So this slide is showing that how voters are participating. And the big highlight here is 88% of voters participated early in the August primary. If you go back to the general election, it was really up to 92%. But early voting is not a new thing. This graph is also showing voters have been participating early from 1946 and now really with the addition of the permanent early voting list in 2008, and then now it's called active early voting list to 2020, are through when it was introduced for this election cycle. It's really increased. I just was looking at the numbers this morning, and we're up to 78% of our voters are on that active early voting list. That means for this general election, they'll automatically get a ballot. And that is up from November 2020, when we had 75%. But this presentation is about in-person voting. And just because they're voting early doesn't mean they're voting through the mail. So we did have again, this is all specific to the August primary, 67% of voters vote through the mail. That's just over 580,000. 33% participated in person. And that was either early in person during our early voting period, 27 days out before the election, or during the emergency voting weekend, there's 5,800, or they dropped off an early ballot at any one of our voting locations or secure drop boxes. That's over 167,000. And then if you count provisional voters on election day, we had 109,000 voters participate on election day. Can we go to the next slide, Betty? All right, so this is some key dates for you to remember for this upcoming general election. Lots of people don't realize that we view the election as starting when we first mail out ballots to those overseas and military voters. So that's the UOCAVA voters. And that's really coming up here in a few weeks, September 24th. And that means our tabulation team is really in the thick of doing those final proofings on all of our different ballots. We will have over 12,000 different ballots for this upcoming general election. The voter registration deadline is October 11th. That is actually, statute says 29 days before the election. It's actually 28 because October 10th is Columbus Day. So anytime a key date, election date falls on a holiday, then it usually moves to the very next day to allow voters to participate. October 12th, we'll be mailing out all of our ballots, opening up our voting locations. October 28th is the last day to request a ballot by mail. And then you can still, after October 8th, you can still get an early ballot if you go to our in-person, any of our in-person early voting locations. November 1st is the last day we recommend that you mail back that ballot. You can still drop off that ballot, again, any one of our in-person voting locations. And then November 8th, it's the big day, election day. And so voting location will be open from 6 a.m. to 7 p.m. on election day. And just an interesting fact, this is the latest that general election can occur in a calendar year. It can never be on the first Tuesday in November. It's always this. If Tuesday is the first day of the month, then it goes to the second Tuesday in November. So that's why it's on November 8th, and it's the latest that it can occur. Right, Betty, can we go to the next slide? All right, Maricopa County provides a lot of different options for voters to participate. This will be mostly focused on in-person voting, but these are the options that all the voters can participate if they choose or if they legally qualify for this. But this slide is really to say we provide, and this is part of our mission at the Maricopa County Elections Department, is to provide accessible, reliable, transparent, secure, and efficient options. And we're able to do this through the options that you see here, whether you're voting by mail, you're dropping off your ballot at a drop box, you're voting in person, whether that be early election day or during emergency voting, or if you need accessible voting options, whether that's through a special elections board or curbside voting, or you need some assistance at the polling locations, or, and I already mentioned, if you need that early ballot because you are overseas serving in our military. Betty, can we go to the next? Okay, so Betty, do we have any questions about the August primary or the general election key dates?
Yeah, Scott, we actually have a question from Mary. She would like to know, are write-in candidates allowed in the general election?
Yes, they are. So, and that filing deadline for write-in candidates has not, so most candidates have to file long before the upcoming November general election. If it's a partisan election, they have to win the August primary to make it onto the ballot. But if you're running as a write-in, so you weren't a candidate for a contest on the August primary, you can then file as a write-in candidate, and that's 40 days before the election. So it's coming up here later September.
Great, thank you, Scott. We do have another question. This is from Joe. Does the election department check every signature on the outside of the affidavit envelope?
Yes, so 100% of signatures on, so these would be all early ballots, whether that is through the mail or if you voted in person, you're supposed to sign that outside of that affidavit envelope. You need to also write your phone number in case we question that signature, but 100% of signatures are reviewed by humans. And then if for some reason we do question that, make sure that phone number is there so we can contact you. Another piece I'd say is if you want to sign up, if you're not signed up for our text message service, you can text join to 628-683. And then if we did question your signature, you'd get a text and would notify you. But you'd also get, when we're mailing out your ballot, you'll get a text when we receive it back. Well, you'll get a text when we've sent that ballot to be tabulated. So a really great service provided by the recorder's office and the elections department.
Wonderful. Thank you, Scott. I think we have time for one more question before we move on. That question is, can I drop off my ballot at a polling place?
Yes, so that is a great question. So we will have over 230 different drop boxes that we're offering. I do go into this a little bit more detail later in the presentation, but you can, at any one of our vote centers, there is an early ballot drop box located inside. And you have all the way up until 7 p.m. on election night. Now, I will say I'd encourage you to drop it off earlier because if you want that ballot to be included in those results that we post at 8 p.m. on election night, we really need that ballot back by about Saturday before election day. So please, and that also helps us out in getting results posted earlier in the process. So thanks, Betty.
Thanks, Scott. And now we'll go back to the presentation.
All right, can we go to the next slide as well? All right, so our in-person voting options. So this is basically a heat map showing all the different voting locations. That's what those little dots are. The darker red colors show where we have where in-person voters live and choose to participate on election day. But so right now, I believe we're actually at 224 vote centers secured for the upcoming general election. We had 210 for the August primary. We're looking for one more, actually specifically up near the Anthem area. So just right under 225, that's our goal. We will have voting locations open for the entire early voting period. So that's 27 days before election day. There'll be 10 locations open at that time. Once we get to 12 days before election day, we'll open an additional 45. So a total of about 55 locations open. And then the day before election day, we'll have another additional 60 to 70 locations. So right around 110 to 120 locations open the day before, and the remainder of those locations will be open on election day. We'll also have additional 10 to 15 secure drop boxes. Most of those are located in city and town clerk's offices. We do have a couple 24/7 drop boxes. We try to make sure all of our voting locations are located along public transportation areas or in areas that serve not only those high density areas where people live, but in our rural and Native American communities. And then we do make sure that our voting locations are not that far apart as well. So on average, they're under 2 miles. I believe as the crow flies or straight line distance, about 1.28 miles between voting locations, as if driving distance is just over 2 miles. I believe it's 2.2 miles driving distance. Can we go to the next slide? All right, so one of the questions I get asked a lot is, how do we know we have enough to meet turnout demand? And this is actually a layout of a generic vote center. It's what we provide our poll workers in training. Little blue squares are our booths. The little, tan colored elongated rectangles with little black dots, those would be our check-in stations. We have printers, some images of our printers, and we have some images of our accessible voting device and accessible voting booths. And then we also have our precinct-based tabulator. So one of the ways that we make sure that we have enough voting locations is we do turnout projections. And for this upcoming November general election, based on historical turnout patterns, we're projecting anywhere from 1.4 to 1.9 million voters participating. And that is a wide projection. But really, turnout is a product of how much interest there is in any particular cycle and the specifics with that election. But just because we have that range of 1.4 to 1.9, we're planning for 1.9 million voters to participate. And then we take that turnout and we then create real live voting simulations, what we call a sandbox. We set up all the vote centers and we figure out where those bottlenecks are going to occur. We do queuing analysis. We run simulations on how long it's going to take to vote the ballot. So right now, most ballots average about 75 contests. That could take anywhere from 9 to 13 minutes. So if you are voting in person and you're planning to complete that entire ballot, plan on 9 to 13 minutes to fill out that ballot. We do have one ballot, this is in for City of Mesa residents that have the school district of Tempe Unified School District. I believe there's 87 total contests on that ballot, so that could take a little bit longer. Anyway, we analyze how long it takes to fill out the ballot, and then we find those bottlenecks. And what we've been able to find is really we need about 8 in-person check-in stations per location. If we have 8 check-in stations, we need about 25 voting booths to ensure that we keep that steady throughput. We need 2 to 3 ballot on demand printers per location, and then we need 2 precinct-based tabulators. And that should keep that steady flow. So the vast majority of voters will wait, approximately 1 to 2 minutes at our voting locations. When we get in that early morning period, right, those voters that are eager to vote, and maybe that line's already built up before we even open the doors, it could take a little bit longer, 15, 20, 25 minutes. We try to keep it under 30. And then in the evening, we could have a couple locations that will be over that, even going to that 30, 45 minute time frame. In the August primary, and one reason we're looking for another location in Anthem is we did have a 50-minute wait time up at our Anthem location for this past August primary. Can we go to the next slide, Betty? All right, one of the ways that voters can be informed about our process, and since I've mentioned our vote center model, maybe I should have mentioned this on the slide, but what is a precinct-based voting model and what's a vote center voting model? A precinct-based voting model is you're assigned one specific location, and that's the only location you're able to vote at. Because we use a vote center model, you can go to any one of our 224, hopefully 225 locations that would be on election day, or any of the ones that are open during the early voting period. And you can go to our website, locations.maricopa.vote, and find a dashboard that will allow you to enter in by city. You can enter in your specific address, whether it be your house, It could be where you work, and it's going to return the closest location. You can also sort by wait times itself. So our poll workers are trained every 15 minutes. They're updating how many voters are in line. Based on that sandbox analysis, that queuing study, we can determine, well, how long will that number of voters that are in line, how long will it take them to get through that entire process? And then we can report that wait time. So this is an incredibly useful tool for voters that do want to vote in person. And you can also just call our STAR call center at 602-506-1511 if you don't have access to a computer or a smartphone, and they'll be able to give you this exact same information for you to be able to participate. Betty, can we go to the next one? Another common question I get about in-person voting is, what do I need to get a regular ballot, especially when it comes to ID? And Arizona is actually one of the few states that actually does require a voter to prove identity before getting a regular ballot. Many states just require the voters to sign an attestation saying that they are that person. So the vast majority of voters have a Arizona driver's license. And as long as that Arizona driver's license matches their current address, that's the easiest way. You'll get a standard ballot, whether it's during early voting or on election day. There's other government issued IDs, so it can be an Arizona non-operator's permit that would also qualify. It's a government issued ID, a federal government, or a tribal ID that also has a photo and an address that matches what our check-in station says. Then you just get a standard ballot. But you may not have a ballot that has your current address. Say maybe you currently moved. Well, then what you'd need is I'll skip to list 3. You'd need a piece of information such as a utility bill that was issued in the last 90 days. You could have your voter registration card. It could be a digital voter registration card. So Maricopa County, we have a beballotready.vote site. That's a personalized dashboard. You can log in, you can get a copy of that digital voter ID. And then with your license that may not match your address and that digital copy of that voter ID card, you then could be issued a standard ballot. Let's say you don't have a photo ID. You can then use our list 2. And the list 2 items would be any utility bill that was issued in the last 90 days, a copy of your voter registration card, a copy of your insurance. And you bring that into the voting location. Those 2 forms of list 2 items is sufficient for you to get a regular or a standard ballot. Betty, can we go to the next slide? Other information. So if you're going to vote in person, you're going to see a 75-foot limit marker. So this is identifying that you're getting close to a voting location. And you're only able to, so who can enter into a voting location? Well, one, our poll workers can, right? Definitely voters can. If a voter needs someone to assist them in the voting process, they can bring an assistant. The voter can also bring one of their children into the voting location, or observers that are appointed by the county chairs. They can also be within that 75-foot line. Everyone else needs to stay outside of that 75-foot line. And that includes media or any other individuals that are interested in what's going on at our voting location. Most of our vote centers are electioneering, meaning that if a candidate wants to show up and hand out pamphlets, encourage those voters that maybe are undecided at that last minute, they can, as long as it's a electioneering site. We usually have about 20 to 25 locations that are non-electioneering, meaning that you can't have signs or a candidate standing outside those locations. Usually those are determined by the site themselves. Another question is, when you get into that 75-foot line, there's no photography allowed in the voting location. And that includes selfies. So you can't take a picture of your ballot, you can't take a picture of yourself inside that voting location. Now you are able to, if you're voting early in the comfort of your own home, take a picture, a selfie, and of your ballot and post it online. There's no laws restricting that. But if you're in the voting location, no photography at all, including selfies. Can we go to the next slide, Betty? So I mentioned our Sitebook check-in station earlier, and this is a picture of it. Most of our locations have anywhere from 8 to 12 of these check-in stations that voters will use. It starts out as a self check-in. So we And if you have a driver's license, you scan your driver's license, it pulls up all your information, it asks you to confirm that information. And then what it will do is once you progress to a certain point, then it's going to blink, it's going to freeze and not let you go any further until we have one of our poll workers come over and check your ID. And then they'll look at your ID, they make sure that the address matches. If it doesn't, they ask you for additional ID, and then they enter that information into the Sitebook system. Then that will allow you to move forward and then get your standard ballot. I do want to point out that our Sitebook check-in stations, there will be some in our more rural communities that we might only have 3 or 4. That's just because we don't anticipate lots of voters turning out at those voting locations. Okay, Betty, can we go to the next slide? Other equipment that you may see at your voting location. So on the photo here, on the furthest on the left, or at least my left, is the ballot on demand printer. So we will have upwards of, well, just over 6,000 different unique ballot styles. And then if you count, because our ballot, 70 plus contests, some with 86, we had to go to a 20-inch ballot front and back. When we don't have room to put Spanish on the ballot. And because we are a covered state based on Department of Justice standards, we do have to produce a Spanish ballot. So for every one of our styles, that really means we have over 12,000 unique ballot styles. And the reason we can use a vote center model is because of our Sitebook check-in station and these ballot on demand printers. I will point out, even when we were in a precinct-based model, we usually would get upwards of maybe 700 voting locations, would have 1,100 different precincts. And that meant some of our precincts had 30 to 40 different ballots that we had to lay out onto tables. And that just created an incredibly inefficient process for our voters to sort through all those different ballot styles. The ballot on demand printer is a huge improvement over that process. The next is an accessible voting device. I'm going to skip over it here because I have another slide that talks about it in more detail. And also, same with the next 2 items as well, the precinct-based tabulator. And here is a envelope early drop box that we're seeing. Betty, can we go to the next slide? Oh, okay. So voter accessibility. This is incredibly important to us at Maricopa County in ensuring that we're serving all voters. And even if a voter has a disability and they want to come in and vote in person, we want to make sure that we afford them that option. So we do that in a few different ways. First is this accessible voting device. It's newly implemented in 2020. And we've actually had a significant increase in the use of this over our prior equipment. But this will allow for, if you have a visual impairment, if you have a mobility impairment, or even a hearing impairment, you can still then come and participate and use this device. Now it will allow you to blow up the screen so the print gets really large. It allows you to swap from it being black on white or white on black, whatever you prefer visually, so you can fill out that ballot. If you don't have the use of your arms, you can bring in your own Sitebook device and then move through the ballot using that device. Then we also have what is called an ATI remote control that has Braille on it. So if you truly are and you can't see anything, then you can use that ATI device to move through the ballot and vote that contest. And then this will print out actually a physical hard copy of the ballot that can be inserted into a tabulator on election day or inserted into an envelope and then brought back on election and to count here at our central count facility. Also, if you want to vote at a voting location, but you don't want to leave your car, we offer curbside voting at every one of our voting locations. And here's a sign that you'd see outside every voting location with our phone number. And then also, if you need assistance, right, you can bring in someone to assist. A voter can bring in someone to assist them in the voting booth to help them if they need to complete the ballot. Now, they shouldn't be influencing that voter's vote, but they can assist. And even if they don't bring in someone, they can ask for assistance from our poll workers. Now, if that's the case, we need to make sure that we have 2 different poll workers from different parties. They're providing assistance. Again, it's very important that those poll workers don't influence how the voter votes. They just assist them with the voting process. All right, Betty, can we go to the next slide? Here's an image of our precinct-based tabulator. So these tabulators go through a very thorough logic and accuracy test before every single election to make sure that they can accurately tabulate the ballot. They also have to be federally certified, going through, again, their own accuracy tests at the federal level, security tests. But then after we do that logic and accuracy test, we're also verifying that the hash code, so all the different programming and firmware that's installed on this matches exactly what was certified at the federal level and the state level. But then we start affixing tamper evidence seals to all the different ports. On the furthest on the right, you see 2 different memory cards that actually come back on election night that we use to report results. Those memory cards have to be inserted into the tabulator and programmed at the very same time. The information on that is encrypted. Each one of these precinct-based tabulators, there is a security fob, so it's a physical security that has to be affixed or touched to the tabulator, along with a unique password that gets changed for every election. So these are incredibly secure devices, and these are what a voter would use on election day if they wanted to tabulate their ballot on site, right? So they'll insert that ballot and it'll inform them if maybe they overvoted a contest. It gives that voter the opportunity to revote that ballot. If they don't mind and they're okay with overvoting that contest, then it allows them to go ahead and tabulate that ballot on site. And then at the a couple other security protocols for these. Before voters start casting ballots, our poll workers verify that there's no ballots that have been cast or counted on this device. They compare all those seals back to, we give them a precinct ballot report, and they confirm that they're the exact same seals that we affixed during the logic and accuracy test. And then at the end of the night, they do a closing report. And they log all of this information on what we call that precinct ballot report. That's what comes back to us, and we confirm all that information before we start uploading those results on election night. And so that's what this photo in the middle is showing, is we've received, and we have a grid that we lay out, and it's what we confirm that we received every single memory card back from those voting locations. And the reason there's 2 is because we have 2 tabulators at every single voting location. We bring back 1 memory card. It's called a poll worker memory card from that voting location that we can upload on election night. Then we keep a second one at the voting location just for a redundancy purpose. So Betty, can we go to the next slide? So one other question we get a lot about is about secure drop boxes. And these are very secure, reliable ways for voters to be able to participate in the election. So if you already have that early ballot, we will have over 230 different options for people to drop off that ballot. The vast majority are our vote centers, right? We'll have 225 vote centers. Every single one of those vote centers has a drop box. We also partner with our city and town clerk's offices, and we'll have another 10 to 15 locations that will have a secure drop box inside their city and town clerk's offices. And then we have 2 24/7 drop boxes, both outside government facilities. One here at our Maricopa County Elections and Tabulation Center, another in our Mesa secure facility. Both of those outside drop boxes are monitored by 24/7 security cameras to make sure that they're not vandalized or they wouldn't be harmed, or that we can always go back and review that video if that was the case. So daily, we send out bipartisan, and has to be a Republican and a Democrat, to retrieve the ballots from every one of these voting locations. You can see this red transport box. Those courier teams take that transport box. They'll empty the number of ballots that are inside. They'll fix tamper evidence seals. They log all of this information on what we call an early ballot transport statement. And then all that comes back, and we do an audit of that information at the end of every single day. So a very secure process to get those ballots that were dropped off by voters in a drop box and bring those back to the elections department. Really no opportunity for someone to insert ballots that shouldn't have been dropped off in these drop boxes. Arizona does have some laws around who can drop off their ballots in these. And really it's the voter themselves, a caregiver of the voter. So it could be someone that works in a nursing home or assisted living center. So any of those voters that may have an early ballot, those members can collect those and then take them to a drop box. Could be a caregiver that provides services in that voter's home. It could be a family member. So any family members, and they ask you to take in their ballot to a drop box, that's perfectly legal. And same as a household member. So you might not be related, but you live in the same household. You can also then drop off that ballot at any one of our drop box locations. Right, Betty, can we go to the next? So this is a photo of our August primary. So we had 122,000 early ballots dropped off on election day. And so this is our election night process where we're taking all of those. They've come back in those red transport cases. Well, actually, it would be blue on election day. And then those tamper evidence seals are affixed. We're having to break those. We're having to organize and sort them so we can scan them in. So these can then go through signature verification, ultimately get processed by bipartisan processing boards, and then sent to tabulation. So 122,000 were dropped off on election day in the August primary. In the November 2020 general election, we had 170,000. So again, we encourage you, if you have that early ballot drop off or early ballot and you want to drop it off and you want that in your 8 p.m. post, please get it to us on that Saturday before. I mean, even earlier, the better. That makes our lives a little bit easier. But we encourage you, and then also that reduces the number of processing or the amount of processing that we have to do after election day, get those results finalized and posted. Can we go to the next slide? So this slide is, and we'll go into much more detail about this in our upcoming 90-minute webinar, which I believe is on October 19th, and then September 22nd. And then we also have our fourth virtual webinar, 45-minute on October 19th, where we'll talk about this. But I just wanted to highlight that our last post during the August primary was at 12:40 p.m. And that was the second fastest ever for election night. The photos before you saw us processing those 122,000 early ballot drop-offs. We were able to get all of those. So the only thing that weren't included in that election night by the time we got to 12:40 were the ballots that were dropped off the day before, that Monday, the ballots that were dropped off, the early ballots that were dropped off on election day, or anything that had to go through a curing process, meaning it's a conditional provisional, someone showed up at a voting location, didn't have the right ID, we were given 5 business days to cure that. Or if we questioned their signature, they're also given 5 business days. And so this graph on the right here are showing all the way back to 2006, the number of days it took us to finalize those posts. Usually it's on average, it's been 8.2 days. So in the August primary, we're right at 8, so a little bit faster than average. And we also had a curing, that 5-day curing period, which did not exist prior to 2016. So just information related to, we're just really trying to set the stage. I know the Maricopa County Recorder, Stephen Richer, he just had if you're following him on Twitter, he just had a tweet thread that went through and was sort of setting expectation for voters on how long it's going to take us post-election day to report these results. We're going to make a very concerted effort for everyone to know exactly what's entailed in this process. Okay, Betty, can we go to the next slide? All right, so we talked about in-person voting operations, and we need your assistance to help us be able to administer these. We'll be recruiting over 2,450 poll workers. We'll have a lot of people working here at our tabulation center, 600 election workers at our tabulation center assisting. They're either driving trucks in our warehouse, they're working in our tabulation center itself doing what we call electronic adjudication. That's if people are writing candidates or tabulation equipment can't read handwriting. So they're then awarding those votes for those writing candidates. Also, they may be doing that bipartisan EV processing boards, right? So sitting there, creating that secret ballot, separating that affidavit envelope and from the ballot itself, and then sending that on to be tabulated. So we have had hiring and training challenges. Some of those are related to inflationary pressures. We don't think any industry is immune to this. We've had a very supportive Maricopa County Board of Supervisors. They've allowed us to provide some incentive pay to try to increase that pay rate. Also some bonuses for people that work extended period of time Bonus is upwards to $1,000 to $1,750. But really, if you go to getinvolved.maricopa.vote, so again, getinvolved.maricopa.vote at the bottom of that slide, you can sign up to be a poll worker. And I will want to say we've also provided lots of training to our poll workers, including premium-based training. And part of this premium-based training is to ensure our poll workers have the hands-on experience with our equipment, but also to provide them lots of scenario-based training. When you look and you reflect back on our poll workers, they're some of the most dedicated public servants, but they're also very customer service friendly. They want to make sure voters have a positive experience. And we want to give them the tools so they can be successful. So we provide them lots of de-escalation training. This was in our premium poll worker course, 16 hours of training, 2 different days, lots of knowledge checks. We're actually adding a little bit more for our election specific training. So Betty, can we go to the next slide? So if you go to getinvolved.maricopa.vote, this is the website it'll take you to. Here's a screenshot of it. And you can see all the different positions by the division. So whether there are poll workers, our inspectors, our judges, our marshals, our clerks, or if you're working in early voting and signature verification, or if you're working in tabulation, you can get information, a little short job description, what's entailed, how much the job pays, and then a little button that you can click to submit your application for us to consider you. So a very useful website for you to get involved. Then if you can go to the next slide. So I've talked quite a bit about our premium poll worker training. Now we provide also election specific training. And here's, if you come and haven't had the opportunity to work an election before, you didn't go to our premium poll worker training, we're gonna provide you 3 hours of in-person training. You see the training manual here, you'll get a really, I think it's 200 plus pages, this manual. Very detailed with all the information that you'll need. It's color coded by really the election process. Starts out with just general information about the election, things that the poll workers would need to know, everything from dress code to whether you can bring food to the voting location. It talks really in depth about the different equipment that you'll see, how to set up, how to open the location, how you check in a voter, if that voter needs to update their voter registration information, everything all the way through election day, how to serve voters on election day, and how you open and close the voting location on election day, because it is a little bit different than early voting. With that, do we have any more questions, Betty?
Yeah, we have time for a couple of questions. Jane wants to know, when do you begin counting ballots for the general election?
So statute has progressively changed and moved up into that process. So we are allowed to start tabulating upon receipt, as long as we've done a logic and accuracy test on our equipment. So we've currently scheduled our logic and accuracy test. I believe it is, might be on October 11th is when we're doing that logic. I'd have to verify that date. But then we're not planning, it'll take a little bit of time for our early ballot processing team to build up enough inventory to process through that. So it's going to be that following week that we'll begin tabulating those early ballots. But we can't post until 8 p.m. on election night. That will be the first time we post results.
Okay. And we have another question. This is from Eric, and he asks, where can a voter go to check their voter registration status, or a new voter go to register to vote?
So to check your status, you can go to beBallotReady.vote, and that's that personalized dashboard. You can log in. It asks you some information. It gives you different options for you to be able to log in. And you can find out, are you registered? You can find out, okay, which party you're registered. Find out if you're on your active early voting list. Once we finalize those ballots, you can see a copy of your sample ballot, so you know who's on the ballot. And you can also find information related to where your closest voting location is, and lots of fill in the blanks. You see here our fill the ballot, but fill in the blanks videos that talk about all the different processes. If you're not registered, you can still go to Be Ballot Ready, but then it's going to forward you to Service Arizona. And that's where you would register for the first time. You could always come back down to the recorder's office or the elections department, get a paper form, but it's much easier if you just go to Service Arizona. and then you can sign up online.
Thank you, Scott. Well, we have, that's a lot of great information that we've shared with you. We hope that you found the information very useful to you. Your feedback is important to us, and we'd like to hear from you. So I'm going to send you a follow-up email with a link to access our online survey. So if you would kindly just take a moment to fill it out and let us know how we're doing. And remember, if you want to stay informed, subscribe to our monthly Just the Facts newsletter. Go to justthefacts.vote. And if you want to get involved, we need your help. Then go to getinvolved.maricopa.vote. And if you want to stay informed, really our one-stop shop for all things elections is our website at elections.maricopa.gov. And it's there where, as Scott mentioned, you can access your personalized dashboard at beballotready.vote. It's really a great way to get all of your information. And as mentioned, we go ahead and upload all of our virtual workshops and video shorts. We're on all the social media platforms, so you can check us out there. And further, we want to make sure that you also join us next time. September 22nd, that is our 90-minute session where we're going to have an interactive Q&A panel sessions with special guests. And then we're going to have another workshop on October 19th, which is going to cover tabulation and results. And as before, I'll email the invites to you about 3 weeks before each event. And so from all of us at the Maricopa County Elections Department, thank you for joining us and have a great day.